Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, I'm seriously pumped to get into this one today. So, picture this. You're in a school group project or, maybe a really high-stakes workplace meeting. Someone pitches a completely average idea, but they explained it so clearly that everyone instantly nods and just follows their lead. But then, meanwhile, someone else sitting right next to them has a total stroke of genius, an absolute game-changer of an idea. But they kind of stumble through the explanation. It gets lost in the noise, and the team completely ignores it. Honestly, sound familiar?
Right, so let's dive into this painful reality. On one hand, we have clarity winning the day. On the other, brilliant but poorly communicated ideas just dying on the vine. It is so frustrating, right? But it actually highlights a massive truth about how influence works in the real world. Your leadership? It isn't measured by what's locked inside your head. It's measured by what you can actually effectively transfer to others.
And that brings us to our core thesis for today. Leadership doesn't fail because of bad ideas. It fails because of unclear communication. Having a brilliant strategic plan strictly internal to yourself, it just isn't enough. True leadership literally only becomes visible through expression. It's that exact moment where self-leadership turns into real leadership that others can actually feel and respond to.
The researchers at the Center for Creative Leadership found something super fascinating here. They define leadership not as some solitary thought process or a fancy title on a door, but as a social process. It's simply about achieving direction, alignment, and commitment within a group working collectively. Leadership is a collective, visible action. Basically, if people aren't aligned and committed to the direction, you aren't leading, You're just taking a walk by yourself.
So the crucial point here is that communication is absolutely not about speaking with more volume or using bigger, fancier words. It is strictly about reducing confusion to change behavior. It's a super simple three-step flow. Clear thinking leads to clear words, which results in clear action from others. If the action at step 3 is a mess, well, you always have to look back at steps 1 and 2.
Okay, let's break this whole concept down into 3 core pillars. Pillar 1, clarity over intelligence.
To avoid confusing people, we really have to adapt to our audience. Dr. Paul Hersey's situational leadership model brilliantly shows how leaders absolutely must shift their style based on the readiness of their team. If your team needs clear, direct instruction, like, telling or selling, and you give them complex theories instead, you aren't showing off your intelligence. You're just creating a massive barrier to success.
Here is a perfect everyday example of how to fix that. Listen to this phrase. Let's optimize operational efficiency. It's a classic corporate buzzword soup, right? It sounds smart, but what does it actually mean? Now listen to the alternative. Let's reduce wasted time in this task. Boom. Clear. Effective leaders translate complexity without losing meaning. You don't need to sound like a textbook. You just need your team to know exactly what to do next.
Moving right along to Pillar 2, listening creates influence.
A lot of people think leadership is just about standing at the front of the room and doing all the talking. But real influence starts with understanding others first. Take a look at these servant leadership traits: empathy, active listening, putting followers' needs first, earning trust, community building. A real leader listens to team frustration, understands what's blocking them, and then adjusts the plan. You simply cannot direct a team effectively if you haven't bothered to listen and figure out where they're actually starting from. Because honestly, that is what true influence actually is. It's the ability to authentically align and commit a group to action. Note the word authentically. It is absolutely not manipulation. It's a multi-directional social exchange built on trust and compassion. Followers act because they actually feel heard and supported, not because someone just yelled at them to move.
Which brings us to our final pillar today. Pillar 3, emotional control in communication.
When things get chaotic, and they will, how a leader reacts completely dictates the team's stability. If you panic, they panic. Look at Ronald Heifetz's adaptive moves here. First, get on the balcony to observe the whole picture. Second, create a holding environment, basically a safe container for tough conversations. And third, regulate the distress. You have to remain calm to keep team tension productive rather than destructive. Actually, think of it like cooking. You want just enough heat to cook the meal, not so much that you literally burn down the kitchen.
And this concept is backed up by some really hard research out of INSAD. They found that emotional intelligence directly drives getting along behaviors, things like teamwork, collaboration, and empowering others. And here is the real so what of this. You have to be able to regulate your own emotions and build trust to get along with people before you can ever effectively inspire your team to get ahead.
All of this leads us right into a very, very common mistake: over-explaining. Okay, check out the loudspeaker approach.
They over-explain everything, they react in anger when they feel misunderstood, and ultimately, they just cause way more confusion. It's literally like stirring up conflict without offering any of that safe space we just talked about. Now look at the clear leader. Calm, concise, providing stability. When things get complicated, they get simpler. Seriously, which one would you rather follow into a difficult, high-stakes project?
Exactly. People don't follow the loudest voice, they follow the clearest direction. Silence without clarity obviously creates confusion, but over-explaining just breeds doubt. You have to find that sweet spot of simple, crisp communication. So I want to give you a practical, real-world challenge to try out right away. We call it the 24-hour challenge. Sometime today or tomorrow, take a complex task or a confusing message you need to deliver at work or school and force yourself to rewrite it into just 3 simple, clear steps. Try it out on a friend or colleague. If they don't immediately know what action to take, go back to the drawing board and keep simplifying.
Ultimately, everything we've looked at today, from adapting to your team, to serving their needs, to emotional intelligence and simple clarity, it all points back to this single powerful truth. Your leadership is not what you know, it is what others understand and act on. That is the exact moment your internal self-leadership finally becomes visible to the rest of the world.
And speaking of moments where leadership becomes truly visible, you definitely won't want to miss our next explainer. We'll be looking at decision-making under pressure. Because if communication is where leadership becomes visible, pressure is where it's tested, not spoken. What actually happens when the stakes are incredibly high, the timeline is tight, and the answers are just nowhere to be found? How do you lead then? Well, we'll dive into exactly that next time. Thanks so much for learning with me today.